Okay, aloha everybody. Welcome to a briefing by the County of Hawaii on the Water Use and Development Plan for Keauhou.
First of all, I'd like to introduce our staff that came along with me. My deputy Keith Okamoto, our engineering division head Kurt Inaba, my public information and educational specialist Kanani Atan, and along with me is also department staff, and also. Yes, we have our attorney. You want me to introduce it? You know my attorney, okay. In addition, water board members that are here with me are my water board vice chair, Rick Robinson, member Sue Leloy, and member David Greenwell. Yeah, you can recognize them in their blue shirts. I'm not in uniform today. But in addition, we do have Planning Director Dwayne Kanuga who will be presenting. And also with me, our contracted consultants, John Nishimura and his staff will be doing our presentation on the Water Use and Development Plan update. Yeah. Basically, I'd just like to open that. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity to present our information to this commission, as this petition is very, very important to us and the rest of the county. Yeah. Basically, the county, together with the Water Department, Water Board, we stand ready to share our information with you in this very important decision-making process. We acknowledge the importance of this information and thank you again for your patience in waiting for the further refined information regarding authorized planned use and the Water Use Development Plan update. With reference to the Water Code criteria for designation, none of the criteria have been met, therefore designation is not required. What is required is further collaboration and work with our community at the county level. We have worked very long hours with our partners and stakeholders in the community, county, state, and federal levels for many months in order to ensure accuracy, and we will tarry no longer. With that, I'd like to call on John Nishimura, our consultant to our Water Use and Development Plan update. I'll call on Dwayne Kanuga to update you on the Planning Department's perspective on the issue.
Thank you and good afternoon. Aloha, Chairman Ayla and members of the Commission. I won't be having any formal presentation. You know, we did our PowerPoint the last time. But I think if you need some reference to what I'll be doing, which is some follow-up comments to the presentation last time, you can refer to the handout in that water supply I just gave to you. And I'll primarily be talking about slide number 9, which is a similar overlay that we presented the last time, which shows the land use urban boundaries relative to the Kona CDP. Okay.
Slides are numbered. Which?
Oh, page number 9 then. Page 9. Okay. Yeah, I was about page 9. Yeah. Okay. You got the map over there. Okay. At the last presentation, and even today, let me back up a little bit. The Commission asked us to provide additional information as well as in concert with the Department of Water Supply. We did that. We transmitted a letter to the chair. We hope you all got that. That's dated November 14th. And it has specific responses to essentially 3 questions that were asked of us through the joint letter, I believe of October 30th, distributed to both our department and the Department of Water Supply. Department of Water Supply will provide you the information on the rest of the items that were called for, and I think they're contained in the handouts and some other submittals that they provided to you. So that's what we did in response to some follow-up questions you had the last time. Again, just some revisiting. What we did the last time is we tried to describe how the planning hierarchy in the County of Hawaii works, how it's implemented through the county general plan, the community development plans, and primarily how designations into the state land use district must be consistent with that process. That is our interpretation of authorized land use. Projects, I mean, not projects, but properties that are redesignated into the urban land use district of the State Land Use Commission. Now, again, the Kona CDP, there's some background on that, adopted by ordinance in 2008. But what it does do, and you can see from the handout there, is it calls for a more directed linear growth pattern, pretty much parallel to the Keauhou Highway. And a lot of that was driven by the high level of development activity, that occurred in the early 2000s, right? Housing was an issue, a lot of construction work going on, 2-hour waits to get there. So when this plan came through, what it did is it envisioned a parallel corridor, basically mid-level between the Malka Road and the Keauhou Highway. And that's what's depicted in the growth pattern. In what we call this area the Keauhou corridor, okay, Kailua Kona to Keauhou. That's when I reference the Keauhou corridor, that's the area that we're talking about. That has been a planning area for the department for, over 20, 25 years. We've looked at where the next increment of growth would go, and we identified this Keauhou corridor as a component of that. Now, as you can see, that corridor has a series of concentric circles in there, and it's basically a takeoff on transit-oriented development. Okay, and that kind of development, as you probably know, it's starting to happen in Honolulu. Talks about centralizing urban uses in these various cores instead of having them just spread out all over the place, right? So conceptually, that's what the Kona CDP calls for in this area of the Keauhou area. And in order to make that happen, the Kona CDP also calls for a very high level of transportation improvements. And that level of transportation improvement is contained in a concurrency provision, and I believe we sent the commission a copy of the whole plan, a PDF version, I believe, right? And so what it does is it requires a high level of concurrency in order to make this linear TOD concept work. That component, that concurrency component alone, is probably, has been estimated at maybe 400 million minimum, going up from there. The problem with the Kona CDP was that there was no accompanying public financing program. It was never adopted. There was some discussion on it. There was some studies, but it was never adopted. And so in reality, what has happened is that development within this Keauhou corridor, it's pretty much come to a standstill. All right. Point in fact, there's been only one authorized plan use project within this Keauhou corridor since 2010. There's another one that's also in there, which is, we don't consider it an authorized plan use project, and that is the Laiopua project that's being done in there by Hawaiian Homes Land. But the project I'm talking about is the Forest City project, which got through the Land Use Commission in 2010. Laiopua and Forest City are the only projects in the Keauhou corridor that are making any headway at all. And the main reason they are is that these projects are bisected by the Ane Keauhou Kalole Highway, okay, which is, if that highway hadn't been built, that would have been a concurrency requirement for these projects to go. Okay, but the highway is built, was completed in 2011. These projects are adjacent to that, which is why they've been proceeding. Still, that being said, the stages of development have been quite slow, and there's actually very little on-site entitlement work actually being done for both of these projects. Since adoption of the Kona CDP in 2008, there have been only 7 rezoning applications covering about 102 acres processed and approved within that same corridor. Okay. So besides the overriding concurrency situation, not all lack of movement for these projects has been, due to the adoption of the Kona CDP. I think you all know that the economy took a serious downturn in 2009, which is right after this plan was adopted, and so those factors, we think, have contributed to the lack of real developmental activity within that area. Yeah. We have some projections related to the residential component within this area, which basically tells us that based on the number of building permits that are actually issued, have actually been issued, which is about 300 to 350 residential dwellings a year. If we project that out against some of our zoning calculations, the full build-out of the Kona CDP in this area would probably not happen until around 2047, or 15 years more than what was projected under the Kona CDP. And again, that total build-out is across the entire urban area of the CDP and not just within this Keauhou corridor, that we've been talking about. So what these trends indicate in reality is that the actual build-out based on authorized planned use projects, right, is going to project quite a distance into the future. It's not going to happen within 5 years. It may not happen over 10 or even 15 years, okay, because of the economies of scale there. And so, we believe that being the case, that, there's more than ample time for your commission to reassess the sustainable yield of the Keauhou Aquifer, rather than to have it redesignated at this point in time. We're also quite confident that the water allocations for these pending projects plus allocations for existing uses are still, well within the thresholds of safe pumping under the current sustainable year projection. And I think Water Supply will provide you more information with them when they do their presentation. So to summarize, and these are points that are actually contained in the last conclusion slide that I gave you, and that is we work really closely with the Department of Water Supply in the determination of water availability for authorized planned use projects. And we actually never provide a favorable recommendation to either the Land Use Commission or to our county council if it's at that point, if water can't be made available to the authorized plan uses, okay? The Department of Water Supply, actually, we know they give a lot of consideration to their source capacity, their transmission and storage capacity, and the system, capacity in providing that kind of confirmation to our office, okay? There have been some references to in the petition relative to public trust considerations and components in the petition itself. What I would say is, if you take a look at the applicable sections of the Kona CDP, again, which is adopted by ordinance, it's a law that we got to follow. You're going to find a lot of strong vision statements and planning principles and overall strategies that really precisely address the protection of Kona's natural resources and culture, groundwater, native ecosystems, alkaline ponds, and nearshore waters, along with rare, threatened, and endangered species, open space, and natural areas. Because it's now, the Kona CDP is now the more specific and defining planning document for this area, we're obligated to give the Kona CDP a lot of policy consideration in the determination of authorized plan uses within the CDP planning boundaries. I would also say that one of the purposes of the Kona CDP moving towards this linear development component was to provide more open space between development Mauka, and the Queen Kaumana Highway, rather than, designating that whole corridor for specific developments. Another thing that we think is critical to note, and we exercise it as much as possible during our planning considerations, is that we believe that along with the duty to review land use petitions against public trust requirements for both the preservation and the protection of resources, our role, we believe, is government also has the duty to appropriately and wherever feasible utilize those same resources for the betterment and social being of our people and communities. We feel that the use of water, we don't think there's a question that the use of water resources for housing, commerce, recreational, open space purposes, and other governmental functions is just as essential as the preservation and protection of those same resources for future generations. Finally, we strongly feel that isolated water conflicts should not be the overriding basis for designation of this specific ASA as a groundwater management area. I've illustrated it a number of times in our presentation, and that is to point out the fact that the Keauhou ASA, is 164 square miles. It's 150,200 acres of land, going Mauka. Whereas the area of the petition is concerned, it's 500 acres of land and another 600 acres of nearshore marine, intertidal, and coral reef area. So we're talking about the petition area being probably about 0.7% of the total aquifer itself. For that reason, we believe that for all the justifications and statements and assumptions provided in the petition, we don't believe that the petitioner has made, in our opinion, a compelling case that the traditional and customary Native Hawaiian rights and practices and other public resources are imminently threatened by foreseeable withdrawals of groundwater from the Keauhou ASA. Again, this is a representation that groundwater withdrawal within the Keauhou ASA is or has the potential of adversely impacting 0.7% of the entire ASA. As you know, there's been a lot of testimony presented by a range of water resource experts, including those of the National Park Service, which could not conclude or validate that assertion due to the fact that the size and the geological makeup of the ASA is really complicated and complex, and is more and more is being learned about its groundwater characteristics, all the time. So while the County Planning Department certainly supports and encourages further collaboration in groundwater management efforts among all of the parties, we believe that the petition to designate the Keauhou ASA as a groundwater management area is untimely, given the extensive testimony presented during this fact-finding investigative portion of these designation proceedings. That's all I have to offer. I'll be open to any questions or discussion you guys may have.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Yes, Mr. Kanoa, I'm interested in learning a little more about the TOD corridor. I wasn't really aware of that. Could you describe the corridor and let us know a little more about the transit component?
Okay, if you look at the, this is, yeah, this is water supply. Yeah. Your page 9, John. Yeah, that one there. That one there. That one there. No, too small. Yeah, that one's fine. This slide, which is on page 9 of what you have there, is an overlay of the Kona CDP on other components that water supply has put together for it. Now, all of those circles represent either transit-oriented development components or transient neighborhood districts, okay? And basically, as we provided in our testimony, each one of those circles, and there's 10 of them, again, this is conceptual land use, a conceptual land use layout, but again, based on future transportation needs, where the community is going to be located and things like that. But each one of those circles represents approximately 80 acres. Okay, so you got 10 of them. So you're talking about, if each one of them gets developed, you're talking about 800 acres of actually compact, walkable communities, mixed use areas along the line. Again, because the component of transit-oriented development comes into play, eventually to make this fully implementable, there needs to be some kind of a mass transit component besides just, the roadway construction that's going on in here. And actually what's happened is of all those corridors, and within the K2K area, there's probably there's 6 of them there. The rest of them, the other 4 start going south from Kailua Kona all the way to Keauhou. But all of those 6 corridors, even based on some of the already authorized plan development uses, none of them have been developed since the adoption of the plan in 2008. And we believe a lot of it is because of the requirement of the plan, to have concurrency in place before these corridors get developed. Now, another component of these of this this corridor concept is it basically provides a density incentive. So there's a higher density in those corridors to concentrate it rather than spreading it out, throughout that portion of the Keauhou area. Again, one of the components is to make sure that, or to ensure that traffic flow along Keauhou Highway, is kept at a reasonable level. As you know, you can only add so many lanes, and they'll fill up depending upon what the economies of scale are doing in the district at that particular point in time. Does that help?
So there's no planned transit component?
Beg your pardon?
There's no planned transit component, is that?
There's no financing component with this plan. That's the difference, yeah.
Questions? Mike?
Dwayne, can you just embellish a little bit about the further collaboration with the community? Obviously, that would be helpful. People need to be willing to collaborate, but do you have any specific ideas of how, based on where the parties are right now, what further collaboration would look like?
I said further collaboration with
Within the community.
Oh, there's a lot of collaboration within the community. What we were referring to was collaboration among the parties.
Yeah.
Yeah, the parties that are involved here. The County of Hawaii, the Department of Water Supply, and, the petitioner itself,
Yeah.
right, the National Park Service, right?
So do you have any ideas what that might look like in the future?
Well, as
How we
you,
move from where we are now to where we want to be?
right. I don't know if it's part of your record, but we meaning the County of Hawaii, and the National Park Service was encouraged. We were both encouraged by Senator Schatz to enter into discussions which would hopefully help mitigate, whatever positions we have on this particular effort. And his office offered to coordinate a mediation session. That was one of the components of that offer was that the National Park Service would ask for a 90-day extension of the petition so that we could get together and see what we could come up with. The National Park Service, to their credit, offered up several specifics that they thought would lead towards collaboration on trying to meet their goals, right? One of their items was to reaffirm, shared commitments among us. And we agree with this, a lot of it, An item there was to work collaboratively, regardless of what the commission's decision is on the matter. We got no problem with that. That we agree that there's an interest in the long-term protection of the public trust water uses in the area. And there's collaboration and commitment in the orderly and timely development of new municipal water sources, okay? They also are looking for components related to future water resource management efforts to reduce the uncertainty among all of the parties, rather than a he said, she said, kind of exchange. Explicit consideration of the potential effects of new water resources, and a due process for well developers and other parties. The next component was a discussion of methods for productive agreement, a memorandum of agreement related to, essentially a county water management program. And then the fourth component was the role of the Kona Water Roundtable. And, there's been a number of efforts to include the stakeholders, the community, the government all put together. So that was what the National Park Service put on the table. And our managing director was able to have a meeting with the National Park Service representatives. And, he informed me that it was a very cordial, very productive. I think we agreed on just about, all of these points, except that they were reluctant at this time to request an extension of the petition for the time, the time provided for the senator's shots, which was 90 days. Depending upon who had what to bring to the table, it may have been less, may have been more, but 90 days was kind of the benchmark that was used, and they were just reluctant to yield to that point. So, and again, we're still holding to this. We still support working with them, regardless of what the decision is on this. I mean, it's not as if they lose, they're going to pack up and go home. If we lose, we're going to pack up and go home. Right? We're in the same community. We obviously share the same, objectives and try to accomplish what we're doing.
Can you, mahalo, Mr. Kunua, for coming all the way up here. I was on an early flight from Hawaii Island myself.
It was before us then.
Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for the presentation. The concentric circles that I'm looking at up there, so can you try to help me understand, like, is there a number in terms of a water commitment for each of those circles?
No. I think if you look at this overlay, you can see that some circles have water commitments in terms of, which would then qualify them as authorized planned use, but some of them don't. So there's nothing on the books as far as we're concerned, which they'd be moving forward towards. And if there was, they'd have to provide, they have two choices, right? They'll either have to wait for government, county, state, federal, whoever, to provide the linkages between those circles, okay, in order to make this concept go, or provide those improvements themselves. So that's why you can see it's pretty much at a standstill right now, because the community itself spent an awful lot of time on developing this plan, and this concept. There's some components of it that could have been detailed a lot better, but it pretty much is what it is. So again, this map, and I think Water Supply will explain it more to you, because this is a series of overlays that's going to show you where some of the authorized land use is already scheduled to go. For example, in the three circles closer to Kailua, right? But you can see that Kailua itself also has, it's fairly developed. It's starting to move out, towards that direction. So those are probably more implementable than maybe the red circle, not the one at the top, but the one that's just below the top there, where there's no connection. There's no linear connector over there.
So Dwayne, you're basically referring to infrastructure.
It's an infrastructure issue. So in this, normally when we have concurrency, and the county has a real specific concurrency provision when we either support or don't support, a change of zoning from a higher use, lower use, or whatever. And those concurrency requirements require you, require that you have to have water, or make water available, or the water has to be there, or you have to make it available. You have to provide a TIAR, which is a traffic analysis report, to show what your impact's going to be on traffic situation existing for your project, or what your project will generate, what additional traffic impacts. And the third one, believe it or not, is you got to provide sirens for civil defense purposes for warnings. So those are the three components of the county zoning code concurrency requirements, which every project has to have before you can move forward.
So it would get on, if I'm understanding correctly, tell me if I'm mistaken. So it would get on this CDP, subject to the water credits from those three provisions he provided, one of which is to get the water credits from Department of Water.
Yeah, water credit, or there's a water agreement, or there's a commitment. I mean, the property was already committed for X amount of units, before you can even get out of the box. And again, we look at, in the hierarchy of things, you're right, authorized plan development, as when somebody converts from, normally it's agriculture, from the state land use agriculture district to urban, because once you get into the urban district, then depending on where you are on our maps, right, you are either directed to a residential project, or a commercial project, or industrial project, okay? But if our maps program you for a residential component, and you come in for a commercial component, well, what's going to happen, first of all, is whether or not you got enough water, for the higher use of commercial or not, okay? If you don't, you're not going to even get on the board, okay? If you do, but you don't comport with what our plan shows, you're not going to get on the board either. So things have to line up in terms of infrastructure, whether or not you're in the urban district, to begin with. And that process of converting land from the agricultural district to the urban district, it's pretty precise. And normally what happens is the State Land Use Commission actually imposes real specific conditions too, because when we provide a recommendation for a project at that level, we basically look for the same things as if we were going to rezone it. And if those components are not there, they're not consistent with the loop ag, sorry, we can't support this. That will be our position before the commission. That's why that interpretation, it's not an interpretation, that's basically the way that we look at it, yeah. Once you get into the urban district, that's when you either have to have your particularly water, committed one way or another before you can get into that and get going.